Hindu News Analysis dated August 9, 2023. The table of contents. Detailed analysis, let us see for the grammar of commerce in a new age of geopolitics. Second one, the climate events and an umbrella for urban health. Next, learning from CHIPS Act of US. Kerala High Court issue norms for sex selective surgeries on intersex infants. For prelims, table of contents are no confidence motion, Maya operating system, sickle cell disease, G6PD deficiency, medium term expenditure framework, nickel reserves in Indonesia, Gravel railway tracks. Moving on into the first article. The first article is relevant for GS paper 2, international relations, and GS paper 3, economy. The article, the grammar of commerce in a new age of geopolitics, the context of the news is since March 2018, 28 advanced and developing countries agreed to have a currency swap agreement with India, extending credit in settling transactions. You have to know what is currency swap. Currency swap is an agreement between two cross-border entities where one of them agrees to provide a loan to another in a foreign currency. The repayment takes place in a different currency at a fixed rate and exchange rate. Interest rate charged on such loans is usually lesser than that available in the foreign market. The context of the news is increasing the use of rupee for international payments. This trend indicates that India is a favored trading partner with potential for a large market. Conclusion, there seems to be a new financial architecture where currencies of the south are ready to replace the hegemonic and exploitative order enjoyed by the currencies and the economies of the north. You have to know what is gold standard. Federal Reserve of Act of 1913 created by Federal Reserve Bank to respond to the unreliability and instability of the currency system that was previously based on banknotes issued by individual banks. This was the same time that US economy became world's largest, surpassing of the UK. World commerce still centered around the UK, though as the majority of the transaction took place in the British pounds. Majority of the developed countries pegged their currencies to gold as the Majority of the developed countries pegged their currencies to gold as the way to stabilize the currency exchanges. But when World War I broke out in 1914, many countries suspended their use of gold standards to pay their military expenses with paper money, which devalued their currencies. Britain, though held to be gold standard to maintain its position as the world's leading currency, and found itself borrowing money for the first time during the third year of the war. US became the lender of the choice for many countries that wanted to buy the dollar denominated US bonds. Britain finally abandoned the gold standard in 1913, which decimated the bank accounts of international merchants who traded in the pounds. By then, dollar replaced the pounds as the leading international reserve currency. You have to know also about Bretton Woods Agreement. As it did in World War I, US entered World War II well after combat began. Before it entered the war, the US served as an ally's main supplier of weapons and other goods. Most countries paid in gold, making the US the owner of majority of the world's gold by end of the war. This made return to gold standard impossibility by the countries that depleted their reserves. Delegates from 44 allied countries met in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire in 1944 to come up with a system to manage the foreign exchange that would not disadvantage any country. The delegation decided that world's currencies would no longer be linked to gold but could be pegged to US. That's because the greenback was itself linked to gold. The arrangements came to be known as Bretton Woods Agreement. It established the authority of central banks, which would maintain fixed exchange rates between their currencies and dollars. In turn, US would redeem the US dollars for gold and on demand. The countries had some degree of control over the currencies in situation wherein the values of their own currencies become too weak or too strong related to the dollar. They could buy or sell their currency to regulate the money supply. US dollar became the world's reserve currency. US dollar was officially crowned and the world's currency, reserve currency, and was backed by world's largest gold reserve thanks to Bretton Woods Agreement. Instead of gold reserves, other countries accumulated reserves of US dollars. Needing a place to store their dollars, countries began buying US Treasury securities, which they considered to be the safe store of money. Next article that we are moving into is related to the continuation of this article, that is the use of rupee for international payment. Russia-Ukraine war and Western sanctions hit India's payment for Russian oil. An alternative route was chosen to settle the payments between India and Russia by using the Indian rupee in transactions related to trade between two countries. Escrow account opened in Russian bank by authorized dealer bank in India. Later, Russia was reluctant to hold more rupees. US dollar, euro or Chinese yuan are not viable. Agreement in the past. The concerns highlighted above bring back memories of the similar bilateral trade and clearing arrangements that India had initiated in 1950s. This was a major tool used in conducting trade with the former Soviet Union and countries in the Soviet bloc. In new financial architecture, the prevalent geo-economic scene has also led to the further settlement in local currencies, as seen in the recent rupee dirham agreement between India and UAE, covering transactions in trade, remittance and capital flows. The process will help to avoid exchange risk for both the trade partners and save for India and dollar payments for its import of crude oil and minerals from UAE. In addition to the agreement provided for interlinking their payment and messaging system, it makes for quick and cost-effective transfer of money for an estimated 3.5 million Indian community in UAE and 18% share in terms of total remittance flow into India. Negotiations are on with Indonesia to launch similar agreements using the rupiah for transaction with India. The conclusion of this article is, with Indian rupee, Russian ruble, China's yuan, UAE's dirham, even Indonesia's rupiah sharing the common goal of local currency transaction. One also noticed the geo-economic and political turns with the countries in the south getting ready to trade, settle their payments with one another without the use of the hegemonic currencies from the advanced economies in the north. It follows as a sequel that the setup will also avoid seeking the help of the institution in the advanced countries, which include the IMF and World Bank, as well as private capital, at least in settling their mutual transactions. Second article talks about climate events and umbrella for urban health. In the context, the argument of the writer is about increasing disaster linked to climate change, increased disease vulnerability due to floods and droughts, etc. As a result of extreme climate events, there is no doubt that households in urban areas, particularly less developed part of the city such as slums and urban settlement colonies, are likely to be the most vulnerable groups. The vulnerability of urban household to climate change event needs attention in country. We need to rebuild the urban primary healthcare systems and ensure its resilience. Next article talks about learning from CHIPS Act of US. It is related to international relations GS paper 2 and GS paper 3 economy. The context of this article is all about US creating helpful incentives to produce a Semiconductors and Science Act of 2022, CHIPS Act, that is the creating helpful incentives to produce in Semiconductors and Science Act, that is CHIPS Act, completes 1 year as a law today, August 9. The act authorizes $52.7 billion over 5 years to boost the American competitiveness, innovation and national security in semiconductors. What is important from the Indian perspective is to observe and learn from its implementation. The crux of the article talks about key lessons for India's semiconductor strategy. The US Act involves cooperation and coordination between several arms of the government. 4 separate funds have been created for the execution of the Act. India's semiconductor industrial policy is being managed mainly by Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology. Schemes for manufacturing, assembly, display and compound semiconductors have been assigned to independent divisions called India Semiconductor Mission within a non-profit company set up by Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology. The policy for chip design is being administered by CDAC and R&D organization, again under Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology. The key lessons for India's semiconductor strategy are: a nodal agency, National Semiconductor Technology Center, has been created to collaborate with the industry and the educational centers. Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology has begun a CHIPS 2 startup program collaborating with over 100 universities and colleges. In India's semiconductor strategy, advanced manufacturing and packaging researches are not priority areas of focus. This makes sense to extent that India is currently nowhere in the picture in high volume chip manufacturing. However, the lessons from CHIPS Act is that India's strategy need to identify and invest in research on future technologies. In sum, the CHIPS and Science Act is a useful template for industrial policy in semiconductors. Next article talks about page 8 of the article, Hindu newspaper, that is relevant for social issues, GS paper 1 and GS paper 2, social justice. Issue norms for sex selective surgeries on intersex infants. This article particularly talks about Kerala High Court gives the directive while rejecting a plea to conduct the reconstructive surgeries on a child, and it asks the state government to form the multidisciplinary committee to decide on the issues till the regulations are framed. What does intersex means? Intersex is a general term used for a variety of situations in which a person is born in a reproductive or sexual anatomy that does not fit the boxes of female or male. Sometimes doctors do surgeries on intersex babies and children to make their body fit binary ideas of male or female. The doctor always assign the intersex babies a legal sex, male or female, in most states. But just like non-intersex people, that doesn't mean that the genetic identity they will grow up to have. This brings up the question about whether or not it's okay to do medical procedures on children's body when it's not needed for their health. Intersex describes a condition in which a person is born with a sex that doesn't fit the typical definition of male or female due to genetic, hormonal or anatomical differences. This is what this article you need to know about this article. Next one is the prelims articles that is relevant for UPSC. First article talks about debate on no confidence motion against Modi government began. So you have to know what is no confidence motion. No confidence motion is a formal proposal moved by the opposition against the ruling government in the Lok Sabha under Rule 198 of the Rules of Procedure and Conduct of Business in Lok Sabha. According to the motion, if the ruling party fails to prove its majority in the Lok Sabha after passing of the motion, it must resign. The no confidence motion is an important tool against the Council of Ministers in the Lok Sabha. For the motion to be granted, at least 50 members of the Lok Sabha should support the motion. This is present in the article. No confidence motion is present in the article 75. So the voting, majority voting is necessary to pass this motion in the Lok Sabha. Okay, that's all about this article you have to know. The next one is why science and technology related article, that is why no disaggregated data on tribal population as the House panel. This article talks about the health status of women, especially tribals. Tribal Affairs Minister wants to be empowered so that it deploy resources enough for health and education. In a written note to the committee, Health Ministry stated that genetic conditions such as sickle cell disease and G6PD deficiency were rising in the tribal areas, and the hypertension prevalence was also high in these areas, in addition to the higher prevalence of communicable diseases such as leprosy, tuberculosis and cholera compared with the other social groups. So what are sickle cell disorders? A group of disorder that cause a red blood cell, that is RBC, to become mishapen and break down, and the cells die early and leaving a short age of healthy RBC and can block blood flow causing pain. And there are types: sickle cell anemia and sickle cell crisis. Sickle cell anemia and sickle cell crisis, the dysfunctional red cells due to abnormal hemoglobin is called sickle cell anemia, whereas sickle cell crisis means blockage of blood vessels causing severe pain or organ damage. Sickle cell anemia is one of a group of inherited disorder known as sickle cell disease. It affects the shape of the RBC, which carry oxygen to all part of the body. RBC are usually found in round and flexible shape, so they move easily through blood vessels. In sickle cell anemia, some RBCs are shaped like sickles or crescent moon, and these sickle cells also become rigidly sticky, which can slow or block the blood flow. There is no cure for most people with sickle cell anemia. Treatments can relieve pain and help prevent complications associated with the disease. Glucose 6 phosphate dehydrogenase deficiency, that is G6PD deficiency, means glucose 6 phosphate dehydrogenase deficiency is a genetic disorder that affects the RBC, which carry oxygen from lungs to tissues throughout the body. In affected individuals, the defect in an enzyme called glucose 6 phosphate dehydrogenase causes RBC to break down prematurely. This destruction of RBC is called hepolysis. The most common medical problem associated with this disease deficiency is hemolytic anemia, which occurs when RBC are destroyed faster than the body can replace them. This type of anemia leads to paleness, yellowing of the skin and whiteness of the eyes, and jaundice, dark urine, fatigue, shortness of breath and rapid heartbeat. In people with glucose 6 PD deficiency, hemolytic anemia is most common, triggered by bacterial or viral infection or by certain drugs such as antibiotic medications used to treat malaria. Hemolytic anemia can also occur after eating fava beans or inhaling pollen from the fava plants, a reaction called favism. Children plus women is also affecting by this. This disease is also a significant cause of mild to severe jaundice in newborns. Many people with this disorder, however, never experience any signs. This is what this article is all about. Next article that we are moving on is related to economy. Fiscal fire power necessary to handle exogenous shocks. This article you have to know what is mean by global headwinds, associated risks in since union budget, says finance ministry, as it conveys inability to release medium term expenditure framework under FRBM Act. Keeping the powder dry, finance minister underlines the lack of any favorable change in the global uncertainties headwinds since February. Ministry had cited unprecedented global uncertainties that may adversely affect the medium-term projections, while skipping fiscal projection for 2024, 2025, 2025 to 2026. The effective management of exogenous shocks necessitates additional flexibility, it says. MTEF requires assumption about the growth rate and revenue receipts. What is FRBM Act? You have to know for this prelims perception. Medium term expenditure. What is medium term expenditure framework? Statements sets a 3-year rolling target for expenditure indicators along with the specification of underpinning assumption and risk. This statement is presented in Parliament under Section 3 of FRBM Act 2003. The statement provides an estimate of expenditure for various sectors including health, education, rural development, energy, subsidies and pension, and so on. Data such as expenditure commitments spread across various central ministers on salaries and pensions, major programs, grant in aid for creation of capital assets, defense expenditure, interest payment and major subsidies, etc. Besides, other commitment of the government are considered while formulating this statement. Expenditure commitment for revenue and capital expenditure are shown separately. Also depicted as a part of revenue expenditure are grant in aid for creation of capital assets and its projection. The objective of MTEF, that is medium term expenditure framework, is to facilitate a closer integration between the FRBM statement and union budget. This statement is presented in the session after the one in which the budget is presented, usually that is monsoon session. The next article talks about the geography that is relevant for geography prelims perspective. The hot slag flows from the truck at a slag dumping site operated by PT Wall Indonesia on July 28, 2023 in Sorowako, Indonesia. The country holds the world's largest nickel reserves and will account for roughly half of the global supply growth 2025 on the back of growing demands for the batteries used to power the electric vehicles. You have to note down top nickel producing countries. First top country is Indonesia, followed by Philippines and Russia. You have to note down the countries which are not very much producing nickels are Greece, Myanmar, Zimbabwe, Turkey and all. The next article that we are moving is related to science and technology, gravel as cushion. This article talks about dampness, that is there any significance in using gravel on railway tracks? Yes, gravel used on railway tracks is known as blast. It is used to dissipate the vibration produced by the train traveling at this high speed. Gravel layer acts as a cushion and damps the vibration so that it acts as a dampener, that we already said. Damps the vibration so that they do not travel long distance. If the rail are laid on the solid base, these vibration can travel long distance and lead to cracks on the bases as well as in the nearby buildings. The blast provides a foundation for the sleepers, distributes the pressure onto the formation and helps in diverting the rainwater. In a typical blast, voids, gaps between the stones constitute 20% to 30% of the volume. Next, the last final slide talks about the mains practice questions for today's articles. That is, there seems to be a new financial architecture where currencies of South are ready to replace the hegemonic exploitative order enjoyed by currencies and economies of North. Discuss in 250 words. Second question is, the vulnerability of urban household to climate change lead events need attention in India. Comment in 250 words. Post your answers in the comment section. Thanks for watching. Have a nice day. Please do subscribe the channel for more updates. Thanks for watching.